On the worst timed night of the year, a man lost the one thing in the world that money could not replace. It was in his wallet, which slipped out of his coat onto a folding table at a coin laundry on the west side of Cleveland, a little after midnight, and by the time he realized it was gone, he was 4 blocks away in the snow, and certain it was over. Not the cash. The cash he didn't care about, the photograph. The woman who found the wallet was an overnight laundromat attendant named Faye. She had $2,300 of a stranger's money in her hands, more than she made in a month and a half, and she was, that winter, drowning in a kind of debt that would have made almost anyone on earth forgive her for keeping it. She returned every dollar. She never even considered otherwise. She did it at real cost and real effort, in the cold, without knowing the man's name, without knowing he was anybody at all, without expecting a thing in return. And she had no idea, could not possibly have known, that she had just handed a grieving man back his mother's face, on the one night of the year he needed it most. He never forgot her. What he did about it took him almost 2 years. Because the hardest person in the world to repay is a person whose whole soul is that she won't be repaid. But he never, ever forgot her. This is the story of how a stranger's honesty on a freezing night in Cleveland changed 2 lives. And it starts with a laundromat. There is a coin laundry on Lorraine Avenue on the west side of Cleveland called the Sunshine Coin Laundry, and it is open all night, which on that side of town, in February, means it is one of the few warm and lighted places a person can be at 2 in the morning without anyone asking why. Rows of front loaders, humming. Fluorescent light. The smell of dryer sheets and bleach and wet concrete. A bank of folding tables down the middle. A bench along the window. A wall of vending machines. And a change machine that ate your dollar about 1 time in 10. It is a humble place, and it is an honest one. And for 11 years, the person who kept it warm and safe and running through the overnight hours was a 58-year-old woman named Faye Whitcomb. Into that laundromat, a little before midnight on a Tuesday in February, a man in a dark coat and a gray knit cap came in out of the snow with a duffel of laundry. He was unremarkable on purpose, tired-looking, unshaven, a plain man doing a plain thing at a late hour. Faye nodded to him the way she nodded to everyone, and gave him change without being asked because he was fumbling for it, and went back to mopping the far corner, and thought nothing more about him, because a laundromat at midnight is full of people who don't want to be noticed. And Faye had long ago learned the kindness of not noticing them. His name was Marcus Rourke. If you had watched movies in the last 20 years, you knew the face. The quiet one. The reluctant hero. The man who did the hard right thing at the worst possible cost to himself. But Faye Whitcomb did not go to the movies, and would not have known the name, and even if she had, she would never in 1,000 years have expected to find it under a gray cap in her laundromat at midnight. To her, he was just a tired man doing his wash. And that was exactly, precisely, the only thing in the world he wanted to be that night. Because Marcus Rourke had grown up in that city, in foster care, on those west side streets. And he had come back that February, for reasons he told almost no one. And earlier that very day he had stood in the snow at Woodland Cemetery in front of a small flat marker, on the anniversary of the day, 51 years before. That his mother had died, and a 6-year-old boy had been handed to the county with everything he owned in a paper sack. He had one photograph of her. One, taken when he was 5, the year before she died, the 2 of them squinting into the sun. It was brittle and soft at the folds, and mended with a strip of yellowed tape, and it had lived in his wallet for half a century. and it was the only image of his mother's face that existed anywhere in the world. That was what was in the wallet that slipped out of his coat onto the folding table of the Sunshine Coin Laundry a little after midnight, on the anniversary of the worst day of his life, 4 blocks before he realized it was gone. To understand what Faye Whitcomb did next, you have to understand what $2,300 meant to her that winter, because she was not a woman for whom money was an abstraction, and she gave it back anyway, and the reason is the whole quiet heart of this story. Faye had been a widow for 3 years. Her husband, Earl, had been a good man and a union electrician for 31 years, and he had gotten sick, the long, slow, expensive kind of sick, and Faye had nursed him at home for 2 years past what the doctors expected, because Earl wanted to be home, and because she wanted every day of him she could get. He died in their bedroom on a Sunday morning with his hand in hers, and he left her his love and his memory in $41,000 of medical debt that the insurance had decided, in 100 small letters, was not its problem. So Faye, at 55, had gone back to work. She took the overnight shift at the Sunshine because the overnight paid a little more, and because the nights were the hardest to be alone anyway, and she chipped at Earl's debt $150 at a time, and she did not complain, because complaining was not a thing Faye Whitcomb did. And she was not alone in the house, because 2 years back her daughter had died too, an overdose, the kind of grief Faye carried folded up small where she didn't have to look at it, and had left behind a boy named Andre, who was 13 now, and who Faye was raising by herself on a laundromat attendant's overnight wages and a widow's stubbornness. Andre needed things. Shoes he grew out of in a season. A winter coat. A dream or two she couldn't afford to fund. $2,300 to Faye Whitcomb that February was not money. It was a month and a half of breathing room. It was Andre's coat and 3 payments on Earl's debt, and maybe, for once, not lying awake, doing arithmetic. She found the wallet at 12:20, mopping past the folding tables, just sitting there where the tired man had been. She opened it to find out whose it was, and the cash fanned out thick under her thumb, more money than she'd held in her hands in years, and for one honest second, the whole warm laundromat went very quiet around her. She did not take it. She never truly considered it, though she was human, and she let herself feel, for exactly that 1 second, how much it would have fixed. Then she closed the wallet, because it was not hers, and that was the beginning and the end of Faye Whitcomb's deliberation on the matter. A regular named Dorothy, folding towels 2 tables down, had seen the cash fan out and said the thing that a lot of people would have said. Said it gently. Said it as a kindness. Faye. Honey, nobody's coming back for that at midnight, and Lord knows you could use it. That's the good Lord looking out for you. And Faye said, folding the wallet shut, It ain't mine, Dorothy. That's all there is to it. Man's whole life is in here. I'd want somebody to give me back mine. And she meant it so plainly, so completely, without a shred of performance, that Dorothy went quiet and folded her towels and thought about herself for a while. But it was not the cash that made Faye go out into the cold to find him. It was the photograph. Because when she'd opened the wallet, tucked behind the clear plastic where a man keeps the thing he loves, she had seen an old picture, a young woman and a little boy squinting into the sun, taped along a crease, worn nearly white with handling. And Faye Whitcomb, who had lost a husband and a daughter and knew exactly what a photograph is worth when it's the only one left, understood in an instant that whoever owned this wallet did not care about the money at all, and was, somewhere out in this freezing night, coming apart over a picture. She could not stand the thought. She'd worn that same face herself. She grabbed her coat. Marcus was 4 blocks away, standing in the snow under a streetlight, doing the thing you do when you've lost the irreplaceable, turning out every pocket for the 4th time, refusing to believe it, feeling the whole floor of his life tilt. He had lost her. On today, of all the days. He had visited her grave that morning and lost her face that night, and he stood in the snow and felt like the 6-year-old with the paper sack, and he could not make himself walk back to the warm hotel because there was nothing warm left in the world. That was where Faye found him. She'd half run the 4 blocks, following the direction the tired man had gone, her breath clouding. And she came up under the streetlight and said, Mister, you leave a wallet at the laundromat? He turned, and Faye held it out to him and said, I think this is yours. I didn't want you worried about it out here in the cold. Marcus Rourke took his wallet from a stranger's hand and opened it with fingers that had stopped working right. And he did not check the money, did not glance at it, went straight to the clear plastic window, and his mother was there, squinting into the sun, taped along the crease. Safe, and a grown man, a man whose face was known to half the country, stood under a streetlight on the west side of Cleveland and pressed his wallet to his chest and wept, openly, in front of a woman he had never met, because a stranger had just handed him back his mother on the anniversary of the day he lost her. Faye did not fully understand it. She saw a man come apart over a photograph, and she'd been that person, so she did the only thing that made sense to her. She put a hand on his coat sleeve and said, It's all right. It's all right now. You got it back. It's all right, the way you'd talk to anyone drowning. And she stood there with him in the snow until he could breathe. When he could talk, he tried to give her the money. All of it. He pulled the cash out and pressed it toward her, saying she'd saved his life. She didn't understand what she'd done. Please, take it. Take all of it. And Faye Whitcomb stepped back and folded her hands and said the thing that this whole story turns on. No, sir, no, firm, and kind, and final. I didn't do it for a reward. It wasn't mine. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. If I take your money for giving back what was already yours, then I didn't do a good thing. I did a business, and I'd rather have done a good thing. She almost smiled. You take your picture home and warm up. That's thanks enough for me. And she turned and walked back toward the laundromat's yellow light. And Marcus Rourke stood in the snow with his mother against his chest and a fistful of money in his hand, and watched the most remarkable person he'd met in years disappear into the cold, and realized, too late, that he did not even know her name. He'd caught only what Dorothy had called out. Faye. Just Faye. He never forgot her. It would take him almost 2 years to figure out how to honor what she'd done, because he had just learned, the hard way, that Faye Whitcomb could not be paid, and that repaying a person like that without insulting them is one of the most delicate things a human being can attempt. He came back to the laundromat the next night. Of course he did. And she was there, and she was not thrilled to see him, because she could tell by his face he'd come to try the money thing again. I know what you're going to say, Faye said, before he'd got 2 words out. And I already answered it last night. So Marcus, who was smart enough to listen, put the money away and asked if he could just fold his laundry, and she said it was a laundromat. Folding was permitted, and he did, and they talked. And he came back the night after that. And the night after that. Because here is what Marcus figured out, standing at those folding tables, that Faye Whitcomb didn't want a reward. But she was, underneath the stubbornness, one of the loneliest people he'd ever met. A widow who'd buried a husband and a daughter, raising a grandson alone on the overnight shift, so busy being strong for everyone that no one had asked her how she was doing in 3 years. And the thing he had to give her that she might actually accept was not money. It was attention, company, being seen. So for the 2 weeks he was still in Cleveland, Marcus Rourke did his laundry at the Sunshine Coin Laundry every single night, in his cap. And he and Faye talked through the small hours, about Earl, and about her daughter, and about Andre, who was 13 and getting a smart mouth and drifting toward the wrong kids, and who broke Faye's heart because she could see him headed somewhere she couldn't follow and didn't have the time or the money to fix it. Marcus listened the way you listen to someone who deserves to be heard all the way down, and he learned everything, not to pity her, but because he was looking, patiently, carefully, for the specific, dignified thing. He never told her who he was. It didn't come up, because to Faye he was just the tired man who folded his laundry and listened, and that was worth more to her than any name. When his 2 weeks ended and the shoot wrapped, he told her he had to go, and he asked, finally, for 2 things. Her last name, so he could send Andre a birthday card, and whether she'd let a friend do the boy one favor, introduce him to a mentorship program for kids in the city, no strings, just a good place for a smart kid to land. And Faye, who trusted this quiet man by then, said yes to both. That was the crack in the door. That was all he needed. Here's the part the story usually skips. The slow part. The true part. What Marcus Rourke did over the next 2 years, he did carefully and quietly, and in a way engineered specifically so that Faye Whitcomb could never refuse it or feel small taking it, because he understood that a clumsy gift would have been a kind of insult to the exact thing that made her worth the gift. Andre got into the mentorship program, which was, though Faye never knew it, run by Marcus's foundation. But it was real, and the boy earned his place in it, and it paired him with people who saw what he was and where he was headed, and quietly turned him around. He found robotics. He found a coach. He found, at 14 and 15 and 16, the exact thing a kid drifting toward the wrong corner needs, which is a room full of adults who expect something of him. His college, when it came, was covered by a scholarship whose name meant nothing to anyone. Faye assumed it was luck, and God, and Andre's own hard work, and she was right about the third one. Earl's medical debt, the $41,000 that had put Faye on the overnight shift for 3 years, simply resolved itself one quarter. A letter came from the hospital's billing office saying the balance had been settled by a charitable fund that covered catastrophic patient debt, and that she owed nothing. And Faye sat down on her kitchen floor and cried for an hour. Because she'd carried that weight so long, she'd forgotten she could set it down. She never found out that the fund had been established and endowed by a man who'd lost his wallet in her laundromat, with instructions that it quietly pay off the medical debt of families exactly like hers all over Cleveland, hundreds of them, so that Faye's own relief would arrive looking like part of a system, and not like charity aimed at her, because he knew that was the only way she'd accept it. And Faye got her nights back. It came again sideways, dignified. The Sunshine's aging owner, out of the blue, offered her a day shift manager position at a wage that made no sense for a laundromat, funded, though she never knew it, by a silent new part owner. A woman who had spent 3 years alone in the fluorescent dark suddenly got to sleep in her bed at night, and be home when Andre got home, and have her evenings back at 58, like a person. But the thing he gave her that she'd have valued most, if she'd known its source, was not any of that. It was that he never disappeared. The tired man from the laundromat stayed her friend, called, wrote, sent Andre birthday cards for years, checked in during the small hours when he knew a widow might be awake. She thought she had made a friend of a lonely traveling man who did his laundry at midnight. She had, in a way. She just never knew how far the friendship reached. She found out, in the end, the way these things come out. Andre, at 17, deep in the world of film through his robotics and his coding, was watching an interview one night, and he saw the tired man from the laundromat, the one who'd sent him birthday cards his whole adolescence, sitting under studio lights being called by a name Andre knew from every marquee in the country. And Andre sat very still, and then he called for his grandmother, and Faye Whitcomb stood in her living room and looked at the screen and put her hand over her mouth, because she finally understood who had folded laundry beside her in the dark for 2 weeks, and who had been quietly holding up the floor of her life for 2 years. And what? Exactly, she had handed back to him under a streetlight in the snow. She was angry for about a day, in the way you're angry at someone for loving you without permission. Then she called the number he'd given her years ago, and he picked up, and neither of them said anything for a moment, and then Faye said, "You could have told me," and Marcus said, "You'd have never let me stay and fold laundry if I had." And she knew he was right, and she laughed, and then she cried, and it was all right. They stayed friends for the rest of his life. She was, he said more than once, the person who reminded him what people actually are, on a night he'd needed reminding. When she asked him, years later, why he'd gone to all that trouble for a wallet, he told her the truth. "You didn't give me back a wallet," he said. "You gave me back my mother, on the one day of the year I couldn't have stood to lose her. There isn't enough money in the world for that. So I didn't try to pay you. I just tried to be somebody worth what you did." Andre Whitcomb runs a robotics lab for city kids in Cleveland now. There's a sign in it, hand-lettered, that he made himself, that reads, "Give it back. Even when you need it. Especially when you need it." His grandmother taught him that, under fluorescent light, on a freezing night, when she folded a stranger's wallet shut and said, "It ain't mine." He watched her do the hardest, most ordinary right thing there is, and it turned out to be the hinge his whole life swung open on. I have told a lot of stories on this channel, but I keep coming back to this one, and I've thought a long time about why, and I don't think it's what he did for her, the debt, the nights, the boy's whole future, the friendship that lasted the rest of his life. All of that is extraordinary, and it would be enough. But that's not the part I keep. The part I keep is the 1 second in the laundromat, the second where the cash fanned out under her thumb and the whole warm room went quiet, and she was a widow drowning in a dead man's medical debt, raising a grandchild alone, and $2,300 would have fixed so much, and she felt exactly how much it would have fixed. She was human. She let herself feel it, and then she closed the wallet, because it wasn't hers. That's the whole story. Everything he did for her afterward was just the world, for once, arranging itself to reward the thing we all claim we do and so rarely get tested on. The story isn't that he was generous. Generous is easy when you're him. The story is that she was honest when honesty cost her something real, and no one on earth would have known the difference. So here's the question the story left me with, and I don't have a clean answer for it. We all like to believe we're the person who gives the wallet back. But the truth is that honesty doesn't count for much until it costs you. Until it's the difference between your kid's winter coat and doing the right thing. At midnight, with nobody watching, when keeping it would be so easy and so forgivable. Faye Whitcomb passed that test without even slowing down, and it turned out the whole rest of her life was waiting on the far side of that 1 second. Would I have passed it? Would you? Honestly, with the coat and the debt and the empty second in the quiet room, I'm not sure. Most of us aren't sure. And maybe that's the thing worth carrying out of that laundromat. That the ordinary honest choice you make when it costs you and no one sees is never as small as it feels, and you can never know which one of them the whole rest of your life is quietly waiting on. This story is fictional, inspired by the quiet kind of decency the best people are known for, the kind that gives it back even when they need it, especially when they need it. If it got to you, do me a favor down in the comments. Don't just say great story. Tell me about a time you did the honest thing when it cost you and nobody would have known, or a time someone did it for you. I read every one. They're the best part of this. And if you know someone who's been quietly doing the right thing while the world takes and takes from them, send them this. It might be the exact thing they need to hear today. If you're new here, subscribe. There's another story coming, and I'd be glad to have you for it. See you in the next one.